Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is such a treat to be here today because we have the vibes from none other than Regan Hillyer. Regan, how are you?
I'm really good. That was really loud. I was like expecting you to play a recording or something.
I was like messing about here, and I was like, yeah, maybe there'll be something really loud. Yeah, no, it's my voice. And,
it's amazing.
for those tuning in for the first time, Regan's passion for helping others achieve extensive financial and personal abundance is powered by a vision where every human has the ability to unlock his or her greatness. She's a self-made millionaire, serial entrepreneur, a Forbes contributor, a success coach. She's an influencer, thought leader, and a keynote speaker. She's a true thought leader in her industry, not only fast personal growth and success, but she's here to disrupt your version of what you perceive to be normal. I can't wait to dive into that. To help you break free of your old archaic systems, right? She uses powerful, unique mindset-changing tools to help weave cutting-edge business development strategies. Regan's speciality is helping experts uncover their true message and launch powerful and personal brands that make a solid and positive impact on the planet in order to leave a legacy. Growing up in Auckland, New Zealand, so just over the river, Regan had no idea what she wanted to do, taking on her own personal long journey of self-discovery and personal development. Ultimately, this adventure would contribute to her incredible success that she is today, right? Regan is one of the most successful entrepreneurs under 30. She's a leading figure in her industry. Regan International is a global multi-seven-figure company. However, a story of exponential success really is just getting started, right? Like, we're literally just budding and flowering. So we're totally watching this space right now and super pumped to get into this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
It is such a gift. So we're here in Estonia, of like all the places, right? So like Australia, Melbourne, originally from New Zealand, Auckland, and like the connection in Estonia. It's like I'm like blown away by just how things are woven together in moments in time. And right, like especially yesterday we went through this experience that you facilitated, which was very quantum, right? And I keep getting mystified now. Like there's more and more research coming out in quantum and epigenetics and all these new cutting edge fields. But I am in awe of how you're making that fun.
Yeah.
So where did that weave in from? Where did you drop into this space from?
Yeah, look, it's been a really gradual journey. It wasn't like something hit me on the head and then I knew and then I discovered it all, right? It's been a real process of peeling back the layers. And, you know, it really started out with me initially growing up in Auckland, New Zealand, and just not wanting to be a part of the system, you know, slotting into university, studying architecture, like we were talking about the other day, right?
Engineer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And from that place, really starting to visualize my life out from there and really seeing like, wow, okay, this is the life I'm creating. And is that what I really desire? And I just started looking at how do I not do that? You know, that was my big mission when I started out. How do I not be in that system? How do I not jot into that? Which threw me down a path of personal development and going really deep into that. And firstly, you know, in a very structured and strategy-based way, it was like, how do I invest in property? Like, how do I trade currency? How do I learn Forex? Like, I was going down all of those paths, right? And, you know, investing in myself and learning, but nothing was really shifting. And then it wasn't till one of my mentors told me that it was an inner game and asked what I was doing about that I was like, oh, well, hang on, not much, actually. And then that's what threw me down this other path of like quantum dynamics and energetic work and NLP and hypnosis and you know, all the things that we play with.
Because I'm absolutely fascinated with that, right? Like I was sharing with you the other day, like my whole thing is about space, inner and outer space. And we totally bonded on that because of the architecture and all the work that you do internally. I'm in awe of the way that you've brought this to the masses, right? Because obviously there's a lot of people that on face value are not open to this inner work, right? And not through any fault of their own. It's just it's taboo or it's woo-woo or it's something off the charts. It's like, why would I hypnotize myself like that? You know, it's just like, what? Like, but it's like in order to tap into parts of this, like maybe you're better at explaining what's going on there. So tell us more about the inner work.
Yeah, look, it's everything. And sometimes I feel like I'm like this like undercover detective that's like that like goes into rooms and environments and like looks really normal and mainstream and like, hi, Like, I can be your friend, and then it's like, cool, come with me. Bam, here's this other world, right?
Excellent.
And then all of a sudden you're like, I don't even know how I got here, but this is amazing, right? So for me, it's kind of a game. And look, I feel like there's kind of two groups of people out there right now, and there's people that are very in this work and doing amazing quantum healing and awesome work, but they also they seem separate to the mainstream for some reason, right? And people often tag them as being spiritual or being this or being really woo-woo or being a shaman or whatever it is. And then the mainstream kind of people often go, well, I'm not them, so I don't relate to them, so you just stay in your corner and do your little magic stuff, right? And so for me, the game has always been like, how can I be a bridge? Like, how can I play with both? Because there's also like amazing entrepreneurs and people that are not in the deeply spiritual world, and both of these guys have codes that each other needs. You know, the amazing healer that's shifting stuff like this needs to understand from the grounded, simple entrepreneur who has all the steps how to do that, and vice versa.
And facilitate that message further and people for the world. Even as you were sharing that, just like bridge was flashing in my head. So that makes so much sense. So what is it, do you think, that like, what is it about you that made you the bridge? Like, what was about your internal curiosities that really helped that space flow? Yeah,
definitely. Well, part of it was actually being, I guess, more on the other side initially and not so on the spiritual side, and feeling the separation and feeling drawn and curious about what these people were doing and what these healers were doing, but also feeling like that wasn't me and I didn't fit into that. Right? And what's interesting is I was deep in meditation a few years ago, and I started asking about my life purpose. Now at this time I'd already grown a successful business and I had amazing tools, but I was like, what's the next layer? Like, what's the next layer I get to dig into? And I received it very clearly. Like, you are the bridge. So like, part of your role is to be the bridge, and it's to bridge these different worlds together so they can remember they're one world, right? So they're not separate, and it's just an illusion, and these guys can really start to understand and work with each other and play with each other.
Do you think that is the future ultimately? Like, people are going to bridge, like, we're going to be living more and more consciously in the bridge between the spiritual and this, like, is totally, that's why it's happening? Yeah,
definitely. Look, I was just at a lunch meeting with Clement from Solvana, right, part of Mind Valley, and we were talking about this around some magical things that are happening right now with technology and science, but then also with the mystery and the spirituality, right, and how they're starting to hold hands, right? That's what's up. How they're starting to come together, and for me, like, that's part of the work as well. It's like, okay, where can we ground into the science and the logic and the structure and allow that to hold the mystery, allow that to hold the magic? Because the minute that starts working together, like, powerful stuff happens versus just being structured or being lost in the mystery. Like, you kind of need both.
And that's been like the thing that, like, I keep quoting this. I feel like it's such a blessing to be alive in this time, right? Because it's just like, we've got so many tools, so much insight to really, like, let's just look at heart math, for example, right? Like a whole group of people dedicated to, like, trying to understand the field that the heart emanates and how it heals and all this sort of stuff. And, like, science is now grounding in what ancient wisdom has been sharing with us for ages. And it's just like, I look at that and I'm just like, I could never have been a skeptic in 2018. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a blessed time to be alive.
It is.
Do you think, like, do you ever marvel at just the timing of, like, how much of a blessing it is to be holding the space of a bridge in this moment, and then obviously reflecting on the reach that you have? Like, obviously the world needs that medicine, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, daily. I'm so deeply centered in gratitude for that, and really just remembering that we're in the most abundant time ever right now. We really are. Like, we have so much available with internet and technology and science and what's happening with consciousness as well. Like, it is the most abundant time. And there are people out there that might say, but Regan, do you know what's happening in the world? And there's this and there's destruction and there's war and there's that, but it's shifting. And that's the thing. If you actually go and if you look at the stats and if you see what's going on, like, it is the most abundant time.
I've been looking into more and more of that myself, and it's like actually exactly what you shared. Like, things are not as bad as we perceive it to be, but mainstream media continually tries to, like, enforce on us that actually no, things are not as great as, you know, you would like to believe.
Exactly.
Do you, like, in your work, especially, like, you know, facilitating people coming up against their barriers, coming up their edges, like, how much does society's, like, influence on people make an impact and facilitate the work that you do?
Yeah, it can make a big impact. You know, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of imprints basically in their field that have been imprinted on people to keep them small, to keep them still, to keep them disconnected from their soul or their higher truth or their purpose. And so there's a lot of that. And you know, the really, really, really deep work that I do, I feel like I'm not even teaching anyone anything, but I'm helping them remember, you know, and it's like they'll go through such a deep transformational process, and it'll be this energy of their mind is like, wow, I've never done this before, but their soul is like, this feels familiar. Like, yes, like I feel like I'm coming back to who I am. Like, this is the stuff I get told all the time, instead of like, oh, Regan, you're such a guru. That's amazing. Please do it again. Oh, I remember. Yes, I remember who I am, you know, and I said this in the process a lot yesterday as I was helping people recode and create their reality. I kept just saying, remember who you are, because there's nothing to be, but there's everything to remember.
Yeah. And I love that, because it's almost like you're teaching people to fish rather than just feeding them a fish. I mean, like, here's the Band-Aid for the solution. You're giving them the inner frameworks to really, and I'm just in awe of just the new language that you implemented yesterday for time-old practices, right? Like, this is obviously a practice, like you shared, like it's a framework that is obviously very powerful. But then the language, like recoding, you know, everybody gets that, and it's like, wicked, that makes sense, you know what I mean? I'm in awe of like how people would have described that in the past, or how to guide them, and maybe they did it more energetically rather than like through the tools of language. But how did you find your own dance with that, or is that just that's just Regan doing her thing?
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. So everything comes through me, you know, and I'm a big believer that it's not my stuff. It hasn't come from my mind. You know, I used to create things from my mind around what I thought would be the great term or whatever. But instead now, like, I have a deep practice of dropping in and becoming available and really trusting the answers that start to come through me, and listening to that, and then acting on them and giving them vibration and life. And so for me, you know, when sometimes I'm receiving a process, a group, or for a client, or for a keynote, I'm like, what is this piece called? Like, I know how to do it, but what is it? I'm looking for the language, right? And I might receive a few, and then I'll tune in, okay, which one has the most vibrational resonance? And it's like recoding, and I'm like, okay, it's that, right? Cool. So it's really, in my eyes, working with higher dimensions, higher levels of source, and ultimately it's just frequencies, like I explained yesterday, frequencies of light coming through. And then our job really, as the channel in this way, is to be the translator, you know, and how can we translate this in a way where people just receive it, because, you know, words are so powerful, right?
Totally.
And we understand, you know, the language and everything, and what it does to our mind and our system, but the minute you even speak a word, all of a sudden it's got a vibration. That vibration exactly that vibration alters your field. It pierces the field around you. So I'm always looking for what is the new vocabulary and the new language which gets to come through, which is going to have the greatest profound impact on someone that's like maybe not even listening and just hanging out or falls asleep. Like, I know it's still going in there, right? And this is what's been abused in the past when we talk about mainstream and media and the control. They know all this stuff, right? It's not new information.
Spelling, you know?
Right, exactly. And so they've been using NLP and hypnosis and all these tools, not for the good of the greater good, right? But instead to influence people. And so there's a powerful shift happening right now where more and more people are waking up, and they're using this, and they're realizing it, but they're using it for good. They're using it to wake people up. They're using it to create a bigger impact, and that's what's up, right?
So how do you okay, so I'm fascinated, and this is my own stuff coming up a little bit, but like, how do you learn to trust the inner voice for people that are listening? Like, how it's like, because obviously we all have a call, have a tug, have a pull, and obviously we can reflect that on your own journey in terms of how you got to where you were, but especially in the moment when you're helping through people, how do you learn to cultivate that trust?
I really believe it's the practice of discernment.
Right.
And everyone has it, right? How many times where you've felt something, or you've received something, or you've told yourself something, and then you go, oh, no, and you ignore it. And then a day later, you're like, damn, I should listen to that. I was right? It happens all the time. It has happened all the time for a lot of people. And so instead of judging that and being like, oh, why didn't I listen? Instead, it's like, oh, awesome, go me. Like, that was my intuition. That was my soul speaking to me. Okay, why didn't I recognize that? Why didn't I listen to that? Okay, next time I'm going to trust it. Next time it comes up, you trust it. Oh yeah, that was the right move. Oh yeah, I was meant to say yes and connect with that person. Oh yeah, we were meant to do that podcast. That felt right. You know, and so it's trusting those pulls and those nudges. And the more you can discern, you'll also have moments where it's like, that doesn't feel right. no, that's not in my highest right now.
Right.
And it's, I'm not perfect at it. I still have moments where I'm like, oh, I knew that, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't I listen? And it's a constant layering of practicing the discernment.
Cultivation.
And also the discernment of, where's this coming from? Like, is this coming from my mind and what I think is right, or what I've been conditioned is right, or what I, should be doing in the next stage? Or is this directly from my soul? And your soul knows within 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And so if you tune in and it's like, yes, and you feel that, but then your mind's like, but here's all the reasons why not to, then okay, that's your mind, right? So it's the constant dance and the practice of this. Yeah.
I almost want to keep digging down that hole, but there's a question.
We can jump.
So I'm just gonna, based on intuition, right? The first 3 seconds. So I'm going to use that as a segue. Right. It's like, how did you know when you met Joan Parr that it was like bang?
I just knew.
Yeah, right.
I did knew. And what's interesting is he knew, and he really knew, and he was in. I wasn't, right?
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't. Like, I knew, my soul knew, I felt it, but I was like 3 weeks out of a 5-year relationship.
Oh.
And my story and my mind was like, no.
In case.
Right. I need to heal. I need to have my own time. I need to rediscover who I am. Like, I ran all these stories, right? Yeah. And so what's interesting is I felt it, and I resisted it for a couple of months. And, we were in communication, and then it wasn't until we really spent some deep time together, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just going to surrender to this because I know and my soul knows, and I can let those stories go.
Awesome. Yeah. That must have been such a process.
It was.
I want to ask, this is a question that I've wanted to be asking for a while, and this seems to be the perfect place to land it, is, do you believe that, and I've just been curious about this, so I'm not sure if this is the right belief to have or not, but can you only take people as deep as you've been yourself? Is that a thing, or is that just a limiting belief in itself?
I believe it's a belief, purely because I've helped so many people generate results which I haven't generated. Yeah, so, and I used to have the opposite belief to this. I used to, for example, say, well, I can't help people make more money than what I've made because I don't know how to make it. But then I realized, well, it's not a strategic thing that I'm telling them, it's their own internal journey. So if I can facilitate them going to their next layer and whatever that then looks like for their physical results, then that works, that's fine. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing then? Because everybody's inner work is their own inner game, and so once they start shifting that, it's less about the hard concrete stuff, so that can potentiate whatever.
And I will say though that your own inner work and how deep you're allowing yourself to go does bear relevance to that, right? Like, so you can only facilitate them to go so far, but then when you go a layer deeper in your own journey, then they get to drop again and they get even further. So it is linked up. There's a lot of people, especially coaches and mentors, and they kind of stop doing the work at some point, and they're like, oh, I've made it. Okay, I have this is comfortable. Now I'm just going to help everyone else go deep. And they hit a threshold point. Their clients hit a threshold point, and you often see the client shift away and find someone else to work with, versus a client that's like, okay, again, and they enroll for another year and they do something else and it's like, let's go deeper and deeper. But that's because that person generally is in the work themselves. And so they're facilitating shifts, and their clients see it and they shift again, and it's like it is linked up.
So in that coupling, like energetically, you take on your clients in a whole soully sort of way. Like, there's a lot that goes on in that.
Exactly. And
so you're coupling your energies, and this is what I'm fascinated by in a lot of different places. Like, you've got some people that are like obviously quite spiritual and like trying to facilitate bringing themselves into this part of the world,
right?
And then you've got your entrepreneurs that are trying to bring themselves to bring more inner game into the world. How do you capacitate like all of that? Like, what are your, like, are there any tools and techniques that you recommend for those that are listening to really find themselves and stay grounded in those sort of roles?
Totally. Yeah, there's lots of tools, and it's funny, one of my amazing private clients has worked with me for just over a year, and the other day she sent me a message and she goes, Regan, you've transformed me from a really structured entrepreneur into a wildly spiritual, tapped in entrepreneur. I don't know how you did it, but this is what's happened. So I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I love it.
I'm all flow.
The detective thing again. Come with me. Yeah. So I mean, there's many different tools. For me, it's never about like a perfect system and everyone goes through the system, especially when it's like private, intimate work like that. But it's very much like, where's this person at, and what are their next layers, and what's their medicine that they then get to look at and play into. Yeah.
So finding each person's each unique medicine, like explain that to us as a process, right? Because everybody has to uncover that themselves. And just recently I've been going through this journey of helping, just even recently, like people set up their own podcasts, right? Which very different work, but like at the same time they're finding their voice, they're finding their messages, and they're just projecting that. And it's like, no, not yesterday. So my mission is just to pull out all the resistance and just go, it's literally this easy.
Right.
Let's just go, get your voice out there. It needs to be heard. Your messages are powerful. The messages are potent and positive. So the work that you'd be potentiating for the people that you're potentiating for must be so inspiring.
Yeah, it's fun. It's definitely fun. My process, to keep it simple, really is connecting really with where their soul desires to be, firstly, and that might look like a year out or maybe even a bigger vision than that. And then we're going to look at how do we collapse the timelines, right? So often they'll have some timeline structures in there around like, okay, well, it needs to take this long, or I need to do these 10 things first. And we really just look to collapse that and remove any distortions out of their field. So often, you'll only receive in life what you really believe you're worthy and deserving of, for example. So if their worth is not linking up with this vision outcome, then we get out of alignment, right?
Distortion.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have a lot of kind of upgrades and refinements around that. And then it's always getting them to tune in and me tuning in as well on a private level, really around like, okay, like what are the next places you get to flow to and you get to pull to. And it's never a strategy answer of like, well, this is the next thing that you do when you're an entrepreneur, but more like, no, like where are you feeling drawn to? Okay, cool. Like let's flow into that area. So it's very unique. It's very flow based. It's very from the soul. Like it's all deep soul work, right? Yeah.
When was the first time that this experience happened to you for you?
The very first time, my goodness. The first time that I ever experienced some sort of internal shift.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was really huge. It was very unexpected. I told this story from stage yesterday, but it was basically when I was at architecture school and I'd never done any internal work in my life, zero. Didn't know what an affirmation was, like nothing, right? I was just like, this is life. And I sat in this lecture theatre and the lecturer got us to visualise our life as an architect 20 years out from now, and he took us through a visualisation, obviously hoping us to be super inspired. Really happy. And it had the reverse effect of me, right? Like I was like, what? That's the life I'm creating? No. But what's interesting beyond, the story and choosing to not go down that path and everything it triggered and woke up in me, beyond that, I was like, oh, like, that's really interesting. No one told me to see that. He wasn't telling me to see those things. In fact, he was actually kind of telling me to do the opposite and see like something different.
Totally different.
But where did that come from? And was that me, or like was that God, or was that myself, or did I imagine that? Was that it was kind of confusing for me.
Disorienting.
Right, it was, and I felt kind of like just really curious about it as well, because I was like, well, if I can do that sitting in a lecture theatre of 300 people and come up with that experience, what else is there? And that's when I really started. I watched The Secret. That was my next move, right? I watched The Secret and I was like, this is the truth of life. Like, this is it. I found God. Like, this is the answer to everything, right? And I was 17. Of course, I told my parents to watch it and they didn't watch it. And then I like hated them. I was like, why aren't you watching it? Like, you don't understand anything. Like, you don't know this and that. And Like, it really caused a lot for me. But that was like my next layer into that. And for me, my like mind, my consciousness was like blown apart with that movie, right? And I look at it now and I'm like, oh, it's an awesome kind of basic representation of some stuff, and it literally opened me up so much, and I was like, oh, thoughts become things. I get it, right?
Such a deep, potent message, and there's so many incredible, like, I don't know how to give gratitude to those, like Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, there's all these like little triggers for certain people to open up, like The Secret, and there's just so much incredible work that's out there that sets people on their journey inwards, and I'm just in awe of the masters, like really again and again, just giving thanks. How from there, okay, so you've had your own inner shift, and then from there, like, how does one realize that, like, this is my work? Like, I know you said, like, it was pretty hard to, like, there was that moment when you realize, yep, this is what I'm, like, I am the bridger and this is what's going to happen. But what was that journey in between there and there? Was it just, boom, this is what's happened and this is what we're going to go do? Or was there, like,
no.
Yeah, that's what I imagined.
No, it wasn't.
No.
So I was, not that.
I wish.
That would be easy.
Maybe next life.
Oh my gosh. So I was at university and I started looking outside, right? I started looking into the world of personal development and courses and mentoring and education, and went down this path, discovered, pretty early on, it was an internal game. And the minute I combined the internal with the strategy and the doing, that's when everything actually started to shift in my life, in the physical. So what's interesting is I had friends and people watching me, 17, 18 years old, and they were kind of like, okay, she's going off on this crazy path, whatever. But then they saw my life started to change, right? And so they came back to me and they're like, Regan, like, what are you doing? Like, I've seen you doing this and you just got that and now you're traveling here. Like, how? And so I started just telling people. I was like, okay, well, stop doing this and start doing this, and in the morning do that and stop thinking about that. And I started telling them the things I was doing, right? Yeah. And then rewind a few weeks and a few months, people started coming back to me and they started calling me and texting me and seeing me and going, thank you. Like, I did that thing and I got here and I did that and I changed this and I now feel better about myself. And that was like the first moment that purpose was ignited, right? And I was like, I literally remember the moment after 3 people in one day had thanked me for me just telling me these random things, right? And I was like, oh, maybe this is what it feels like. Like, maybe this is what purpose feels like. It was like my first taste of it. And so I thought, well, okay, well, maybe there's something in this. I'm learning all this stuff about money and strategy and sales. I was like, okay, well, maybe this could be a business, right? So I started a one-on-one coaching business, right? Now, I'll share with you, to work with me now over 12 months, it's $1 million investment, right? Now, people see that now and they're like, wow, I started, and for 12 weeks of coaching someone where I was on the phone with them, I think twice a week for like 3 hours. Like, it was ridiculous. I charged her $300, right? That's where I started.
For the whole 12 weeks,
For the 12 weeks.
For the whole
Slave
12
labor.
weeks.
Slave labor. That was the best $300 of my life, right? And literally, that's one of my best, proudest moments in business, because I believed in myself in order enough to actually go out there and do that.
Take the jump into something completely different, the unknown, walking into that.
It was huge. And then I kind of continued on that path of one-on-one, eventually raised my prices a little bit.
10% every time, so she's got a lot of experience.
So funny. I went down this path and I basically maxed myself out. Like, I was loving what I was doing. I was on the phone coaching for 8 to 10 hours a day. It was full on. I was turning clients away. And I was like, okay, I love this, but this does not make sense. I'm getting exhausted. How do I leverage this? And so that's when I started speaking. So I started running events in Australia and in New Zealand. And I was speaking like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Auckland, like doing this loop, right? And I started filling these small events, 10 people in the room. And I grew that to roughly $1 million a year and was doing it pretty full time. And what's interesting is one of the events I was standing outside of the door and there was like 40 people in the room that had invested to come and hear me speak. And I didn't want to go inside, right? And I literally went to open the door and I got this like feeling in my stomach that was like, no, like you're done. Like,
that
this
intuition.
And it was the same feeling I felt at university when it was like, no, not architecture. But it freaked me out. So I was like, but I have this life now. I love what I do. I love my clients. I love the business. Like, if it's not this, then what is it, right?
Because you've just drummed your whole way here, right?
I was like, but I know that feeling and I'm not willing to ignore that feeling. So I went to Bali for 4 weeks. I just walked away from everything. And I started asking some questions and I started asking, okay, if it was to be different, if it was to be more in alignment, what would be different? And I realized that I wanted to touch more people and I couldn't do that in the business model where I was speaking to 10 people at a time. I also realized I wanted to travel the world and impact more than just Australia and New Zealand, even though I love Australia and New Zealand. I'll always be home.
She's coming home. She's actually coming home next month, guys. So
it's
super
true.
exciting.
And so that's when I launched my online business, right? And I took my skill set and I branded myself personally and I went online and I got over all the fears of being seen online and everything that came up for me and did all the internal work. But that was really the transition. And it was around that time that I started really receiving, oh, you're the bridge, right? And this is the vehicle for you to be the bridge. It's stages, but it's also the internet.
Right. Yeah. And so there's thank you so much for sharing
welcome.
that. So the inner and the outer, and I think I would never be able to like have this conversation with you on a podcast and not go into that, because you just described that, like the outer work and then doing the inner work, the self-worth stuff and like the recognition stuff or whatever comes up for a person in between, like, okay, now I need to impact more people or like that's my alignment per piece now. So I'm fascinated by that, just like how the inner work happens and the outer work happens. But I think for a lot of people, like you described, there's we're doing the inner work or we're doing the outer work.
Right.
But when you couple the two together, it's almost like you've got stats and data. Right? And it's like, well, that didn't work, so we're not running that campaign ever again. And
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's like you can really get some real-time feedback on what you're doing. Real-time being relative, obviously, because it's your life. But like for me, I'm in awe of that process, and it must be why I believe, or I'm just I'm guessing a lot of people keep coming back, because you create the inner shift, but then the outside results speak for themselves. Totally.
And there's such a beautiful dance that happens between doing the internal work, but then using that as a springboard for what action you actually take, right? And people are doing this, like you said, they're either doing one or the other, or they're doing it separately. They're like, okay, let me do my meditation in the morning, and now that's separate, let me run my business. No, they're linked. Like, the whole point of doing the inner work is to impact the business, or impact the family, or impact the purpose, or whatever it is, in a better way. So I'm always looking at, okay, what's the inner work, the alchemy that gets to take place, and then from this place, what's the aligned action that I get to take, right? And something interesting around, you know, the how, the strategy, or the action that we do for the rest of the day. So many people shift from the inner work to the outer work, and they say, okay, what do I now need to do to make it happen, right? And like, what do I need to do to make it happen? And it's interesting, if you dig into that energetically with the languaging, you're actually saying to the world, to the universe, to God, literally, like, okay, what do I need to do to make it happen? Basically, I'm in control of this process, and I'm not supported, and it's just me, and I'm all alone. And if I don't do it right, by the way, it's not going to happen. I'm going to screw it up.
Faith.
Right? And so to tweak that, I'm always asking myself, okay, well, through this inner work, it's done. Like, it's quantum, it's shifted, it's done. But from this place, what can I do to just accelerate the process? Because it's already done. I'm not trying to make anything happen. It's done. But I can show up and participate to speed it up coming into the physical. And from that place, it's like, wow, the aligned action is this, is this, is this. You know, often my clients will do 3 things in their day or in their business, and the stuff happens, versus someone doing 100 things and trying to stab in the dark because they're not syncing them up.
Yeah. Wicked. I want to have a chat about creativity.
Okay, let's do it.
Because obviously when with the work that you're facilitating, like, people are getting really creative. Like, they're dreaming up their ideal futures, or they're dreaming up where they want to be a year from now, and whatever they want to facilitate. Like, how do you, like, I'm just in awe of creativity. Primarily, I'll have a little rant of my own, which is basically, I believe creativity is vitality, because it's in the accordance of the laws of nature, basically, right? It's, we're all meant to be creative. And I feel like those that aren't creative are decaying, and they're, you know, not serving the natural laws, and that's why nature reclaims them, and then dis-ease sinks in. But the work you do, I'm in awe of, because you're facilitating people's creative process, and not just facilitating it, but accelerating so much of that. Like you said, collapsing timelines, which sounds super out there when you're just the average listener, but it literally, it's like when you get that clear, no distortion, things can drop in that much faster, right? So that creative process, you obviously have an incredible creative process, touch wood, because you just released an album or a track, right? With this, can you tell us more about like that creative process and what drove that, but then also your creativity with your work? After that, I've asked too many questions.
Okay, it's great. Let's talk about it. I got it. I have things to say. So for me, creativity is right. It's exactly what you're saying. It's life force energy, right? And I believe that everyone is totally creative. Like it's kind of the illusion control thing in school. It's like, oh, well done, you're creative, but you're not. You're good at maths and science, but you're not creative, honey. And it's like, no, you are. Everyone's creative if they're allowing themselves to tap into their creativity. Creation is just source coming through you, right? It's something greater than you working through you. So for me, around this process, I'm often looking at, okay, cool, if I was to be more creative, what would be going on? Linked to my big vision, right? The vision always of like, for me personally, how can I impact more people? How can I wake up more people? Okay, I'm open, I'm available. Now, if I'm doing that from my mind, I'm like, well, I only know what I know and I've got to do these things and launch another course or whatever, right? But if the minute I open to universal creativity, because it's not even my creativity, right? The creative energy of the universe to come through, the more I do that, all of a sudden, it's like, I get this message, right? And I'm sitting there in meditation, and it's like, you need to integrate music into your work. And I write it down, and I'm like, Really?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I played the piano since I was 4, and then I'm actually a drummer, but I haven't played, for ages. It's not a part of my daily life, right? I love music, but I'm not a musician as such in my day-to-day and in my purpose, right? So I received this message, like, if you want to impact more people, then you need to branch into music. Now, my mind goes crazy. My mind's like, no, that's going to distract your brand.
That makes no sense.
That makes no sense. I don't know how to record a song. I'm not a singer. What? Right?
Logic, Regan. Logic.
Right. So I'm like, okay, that's my mind. That's not helpful right now.
Yeah.
And I let it dissipate, and then I keep tuning in. Like, okay, how do I get to do this? What does this look like? And I get this message like, no, just trust it. Just trust it. And when the opportunity comes up, say yes. And I'm like, okay. So for like a year, Lisa Nichols has been saying to me, you need to meet my niece, Lakeisha. You need to meet my niece, Lakeisha and Michelle. Like, you guys will just love each other. You're just the same human. Like, you're loving it. And I was like,
same energy.
I'm like, yeah, Lisa, like, I'm kind of busy, but yeah, like, if I see your niece, I'll say hi to her, like, whatever. Yeah. She's saying that to Lakeisha, you need to meet Regan. Lakeisha's like, yeah, Lisa, like, I'm busy. We'll figure it out at some point, right?
Yeah.
And so Lakeisha and I, we haven't met yet, right? We've connected on Facebook, right? And I post that I'm in Dallas, and she sees my status. I'm speaking there, and she's like, I'm in Dallas too, right? So we catch up, we have breakfast, and all of a sudden we're in this like vortex of conversation about artists, because I work a lot with artists. I believe speakers and writers, they're all artists. Everyone's an artist, right? And so we're saying how artists don't surrender to their work, and how there's so much more powerful art coming through them, and so many of them are playing a small game. And we're listening to ourselves, observing this conversation. We're like, this conversation needs to be talked about, okay? And we were like, yes. And then we're like, how do we talk about it? We're like, I don't know. I was like, I need to get on a plane. So I get on a plane, and then 2 months later, we meet in Barcelona for Mind Valley U, which was last year, right? And so then all of a sudden, Lisa's there, I'm there, and Lakeisha's there, and Lisa's like, you guys need to talk. And so Keisha and I are like, yes, ma'am, we're listening. And so we just decide to hang out, right? No attachments. We're like, let's just go hang out. So we're in Lisa's apartment. Lisa's out somewhere. We order some wine and we order some sushi, right? Yeah. And so we're sitting down and we continue this conversation.
This is the recipe, by the guys.
We continue the conversation about artists. Yeah. And I said, you know what? Since we had that conversation, I've written some blogs about it. I want to read them to you, right? So I pull up these blogs on my laptop and I'm reading them to Kish. And she starts singing around me. And I'm reading and she's singing. And we stop and we look at each other. We're like, this is like a song. This is a song. Gosh. And we're like, this is like a spoken word song. She's like, keep talking. And I'm like, keep singing.
Stop doing what you're doing. Go back to what you were doing.
Right. Yeah, awesome. And so all of a sudden we do this. We record it on her iPad. We listen to it because she's got like beats and stuff. She's doing her music thing. Yeah, I'm doing my speaking thing. She's singing. Yeah. We're mixing it. We're like, okay. And then we look at it. We're like, okay, well, let's record it. So a month later, we go to Hollywood. We lay it down in a studio. We create a music video around it and a whole online course for artists to unleash their art and their truth, right?
Wicked.
Since then, we've done a whole album which came out like 3 weeks ago. It's on Spotify.
Oh, shit.
So the big moral of the story, of that long story, is simply if I wasn't open to the universal creativity, if I'd been in my box, if I'd been like, no, I'm a speaker and a writer, I'm not a musician right now, then I wouldn't have even been available to that. She would have been like, this is the song. And I'd be like, good for you. Go write your song. You're a musician. I'm not. But instead I was like, oh, hang on. Wait, music. Wait, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, right? That is such an inspirational story. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And the message to just stay open is such a potent one, such a profound one.
Right.
Yeah, I could just sit in that for ages. just bask in that. Yeah. So how do you encourage other people that are not as open-minded to stay open? And for those that are listening that are not inclined to want to open, how would you encourage them to be open?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely a choice. Yeah, it really starts with a choice and an intention. And if you're thinking, well, I don't want to be open, then that's okay. Stay not open. It's all right. It's your journey. But if you're someone where you're like, wow, you know what, I would love to tap into creating my ideal life. I'd love for things to be easier. Maybe you'd love to have a beautiful relationship or more money or to travel or whatever it is. If there's something there, then it is your responsibility to participate in the process, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it really starts with that choice, that decision around going, okay, I'm just going to tune in. And so it doesn't have to be a big long-winded thing where you go away for 30 days and disconnect from technology. I mean, maybe it is. Or it could be just 5 or 10 minutes in the morning where it's like you get to just be with you, and for people starting out, something that I love getting them to do is just wake up and just take your own pulse. Just take your pulse. Just be like, okay, let's just tune into me. Where am I at?
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to open and receive all this stuff. Well, yeah, we can't do that unless we have an awareness of where we're at. So take your pulse. How am I doing with my love? How am I doing in my life? How am I doing with my purpose? Like, just check in on everything. No judgment, just awareness. And from that place, all of a sudden you start tapping into, well, if it's not like this, then what could it be like? And what would be the vision around that? And we start gently opening. You know, it doesn't have to be a big drastic thing. It can literally just be starting to integrate this, starting to jot down and journal some ideas, starting to just be still, starting to be aware of your breath. Like, all of this stuff counts. And I don't believe there's like one secret tool, like you must journal, you must meditate. If you don't meditate, you're going to do it all wrong. No. You're
going to meditate a specific way too.
Specific time. Right?
Yeah.
Find the tool that works for you. I used to be like anti-meditation, right? I have like videos online where I'm like, I don't meditate, right? I can't meditate. I get lost in meditation. I need to journal. That was where I was at.
Yeah.
And journaling got me a long way just by putting pen to paper and writing stuff down.
Yeah.
And then I was like, hang on, when I'm journaling, I'm kind of in a meditative state. Wait. And then it was like, how do I meditate with my eyes open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So I started asking some different questions.
Really good questions.
Yeah,
I love that. So we'll ask about questions. I just wanted to share just on that piece, because I've got this saying, because I guide and teach meditations on construction sites in Australia at the moment, and corporate mindfulness is kind of my thing. So I always share that because there's 7.6 billion people on the planet, there's at least 7.6 billion ways to meditate. Right? Because we're all the universe looking in on ourselves. Yeah. And if we had the same way of looking in on ourselves, one of us is superfluous to the whole grand agenda of things, right? So there is no way that our meditations are going to be the same. So finding your own groove is the whole thing. But you dove into something epic, which was questions, right? Like asking better and better questions, because that has been like, we talked about openness, and from there, I couldn't think of a better segue, because I realized that a big up-leveling is just like asking up-leveled questions.
Yes. It's massive. I'm pretty sure it's Tony Robbins that says if you ask quality questions, you'll get quality answers, right? And when I first heard that, I was like, but I put it outside of myself. I was like, if I ask my friend a quality question, I'll get a quality response. And I was doing that for years, and then it hit me, and I was like, what if I ask myself some quality questions? Whoa, what's going to happen then? Exactly. I started doing that, and that's how I love to journal. It's also I love to journal that way and meditate that way, and literally just ask myself just one thing, you know, if my life could be in greater alignment, what would it look like? You know, if I was to tap into the vision beyond my vision, what would that look like, right? If I was to start saying yes to the things I haven't said yes to before, what would I say yes to? Right? Like, I'm asking myself these questions all the time, especially if you get in a place where you feel like you don't know what you're calling into your life, or you feel overwhelmed, or you're not feeling inspired or creative. Just ask yourself a question and then do what you want with it. You can sit with it, you can talk it out with someone, you can write about it, you can meditate with it, doesn't matter.
Can I ask you, in and around all of this that is weaving, because there is so much that you have to share, obviously, what is the deepest message in your heart that you want to share with everybody?
For me, it always comes back to having people remember that the stuff inside of them is real, which is a lot of what we've been touching on and talking about. And really remembering that if they listen to that and if they trust that, then ultimately they can create a life that just looks totally perfect for them, right? Knowing that they can have it all in their life, and they can have it in whatever way that looks like for them, and they can have it all now. You know, we're so conditioned by so many people to go, well, you can have it all, but not right now, and one at a time, and focus on one thing. No, like, you're one collective unit, right? And you can literally go in and have that reflected back to you into your life if you start trusting the inner stuff.
I love that, especially because what's come up for me recently is, like, I'm a big fan of storytelling, but also context has just become, like, you know, they say with philosophy, context is a big part of everything. And just yesterday, Kay and I were literally on the street. We met this gentleman at Mind Value, a good friend of ours, and he's at least 50, 60. And he turns around to me and he, like, just blew a belief system out of my head, which was like, he goes, every year every decade, life gets better. Yeah. And I was looking at him and I was like, and I was just observing myself because I'm like, if a 15-year-old girl told me that or a boy told me that, that would be so bland.
Yeah.
But because he's older than me and he's presenting it with that context, it's like it had so much impact. I was like, that totally landed and it totally shifted something inside me. And I bring that story up as like a little premise to just really thank you, because you've obviously work, like doing the inner work, and not just done the inner work, but as we discussed, doing the inner work, but also the context of your life, because out here you have like touch wood, may you continue as well, but you have manifested, and that gives the message so much potency, the context that you've put it in. And so I really respect that and really value that. And on that, I'm just really grateful for having you here today, and all the time you've spent and just sharing the energy, and like obviously the time that you spent with all of us here at My Value as well has been really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I've got one last question, which is my favorite question and by no means my least question. Beyond all the entrepreneur support, the businesses, the travel, the adventure, beyond the skin suit even, who is Regan?
Regan is just pure light at the end of the day. Yeah, pure light, and always looking to elevate that light to be of the highest vibration and of the greatest service, to be in full service mode in the world.
Service! Yes! Love your vibe, sister. Thank you so much.
You're amazing.
Love that. So for those that want to tune into Regan, the easiest place to do that would be?
Yeah, you can go to reganhillyer.com, or even better, all of my social media is all under Regan Hillyer, and there's lots of fresh, amazing free content on there all the time, and you can reach out, send me a message.
Amazing. Yeah. And guys, her social media is super entertaining to follow, but even seeing her live, that's happening next month in Australia. So those that are listening to this in real time, we will get her in Australia next month. So tune into that. We'll keep you posted through the Inspired Evolution as well.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
So
fun.